In the city of New Orleans, where the Mississippi River whispers secrets of the past, a legend unfolds, the story of the Seven Sisters. Known as powerful diviners and healers, these women were said to dwell near the bridge leading into Algiers, their presence a beacon for those seeking insight and guidance. Among them, the seventh sister stood out, whose fortune-telling skills were sought after by many. With a blend of prayer and hoodoo rituals, she and her companions transformed lives of those who dared to believe. But as whispers of their powers spread, so did skepticism. Were the Seven Sisters real, or merely a myth? Some claim to have witnessed their gifts firsthand, while others dismiss them as merely folklore. Join me as we delve into the tales of the Seven Sisters, exploring the blurred lines between fact and fiction, uncovering the legacy of these women who continue to captivate the imagination of all who seek the truth behind their tale. Hey everyone, welcome back to Papa Seer's YouTube channel. If you love diving into captivating stories about hoodoo history, Black American spirituality, and so much more, then you're in the right place. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel so you always know whenever I post a new video. I'll give you a moment right now to go ahead and hit like and also subscribe. Making videos for these amazing stories takes a lot of work and a lot of time. So if you'd love to support my work, please consider donating by using the Super Thanks button or one of the donation links in the video description. Your support helps grow the channel and also gives me the time and flexibility to continue bringing these fascinating stories. Now, let's get back to the video. Good morning and grand rising or grand evening, wherever you may be listening. It is me, Papa Seer, host, narrator, and storyteller of the #1 hoodoo and spirituality based podcast, the Hoodoo and Chill podcast. I am here today with a much requested episode, not only from the members of my spiritual family and the people who are in my Discord group, but also from my family on YouTube, people who listen to the podcast from everywhere. I mean, this topic has come up so many times. Papa Seer, can you please do a profile? Can you please do a video on the Seven Sisters of New Orleans? At first, it wasn't a priority to me because of what I know about this story. Spirit did move me to go ahead and really deep delve into the layers of this story to help uncover the truth, uncover the myth, and provide, insight as to who the Seven Sisters were. So I'm excited to be here today. First and foremost, I do want to give a shout out to everyone who has been listening and watching all of my videos on YouTube, especially that last podcast that I did on Madama, Mammy, and Big Mama. We got some really good feedback on that. So please continue to like, share, subscribe. Please share these videos to your respective communities. You all, I do this not necessarily for personal gain, but because I feel like there needs to be a voice, there needs to be a truth, there needs to be someone willing to uncover the facts, someone willing to get down in the nitty-gritty about our history and to provide information that's not only entertaining, but, in a way that is understandable. I love what I do. I love to research, and every time I podcast, every time I put out a video, I really get excited about it, especially today. The Seven Sisters. This video, this podcast for me is going to be broken down into two parts. We're going to do the podcast breakdown where I give my own commentary, personal opinions, what I truly believe is the underlying facts of this story. And then I'm also going to provide you all with an informational video with images and so on and so forth. So this will be done in two parts. And I implore you all, of course, please to like, share, and subscribe. Share the videos. If you love me, hit the super thanks button on YouTube. Send a donation. We are very much a donation-based project. Everything that comes in is from a donation, and it truly is what keeps the podcast on air. It is truly what gives me the gas to continue to put out these videos and give me the time and the flexibility to continue doing what I love. So to all of my supporters, thank you all graciously for everything that you do for the Hoodoo and Chill podcast. Papa Seer loves you. You have a special place in my heart. Let's not waste any more time. Let's jump right on into this. Okay, so who were the Seven Sisters? Now, if you have any knowledge or background in the Hoodoo community, religion, so on and so forth, you've heard of this before. You've heard of the Seven Sisters. Going to be very transparent, I haven't come across any information that goes into detail as much as I'm going to go into detail with it today. But we've all heard of the Seven Sisters. So the legend goes that there was a group of women, 7 sisters, who practiced spiritualism. They were mediums. Some say they were hoodooist. Some say they were voodoo san. Some say that they did a blend of New Orleans style hoodoo voodoo. But what is common amongst all stories, all tales, is that these were a group of women who held a legendary gift of mediumship and divination as well as healing, but more so along the lines of mediumship and divination. These women were from New Orleans, specifically the hoodoo town, the neighborhood known as Algiers. They were said to have lived near the bridge that takes you into Algiers across the river. There's even evidence that they may have stayed on Colosseum Street in this locality. If you have been around the culture of hoodooism, then you are aware that there are many different versions of the story. Some say that there were 7 sisters and they each had a specific gift. Then there were some that say that they all shared the same gift. They all did the work together. The way these stories are told, it almost sounds as if these were a group of biological sisters who lived in a home together, who ran a hoodoo business together. They were immensely powerful, and when they came together, it was almost as if there was no limit on their power. Now, I have to be personable today in today's podcast because I'm giving my own commentary. I have not did an expose. I have not put out anything on the 7 sisters. Just to be transparent, I really took this as a myth. And a lot of people who have spoken to me about these stories, they were in agreement that, this was a myth, that this wasn't 100% true. Of course, there's always an underlying evidence of truth in every myth, in every legend. But the way it was put to me is that this was a story that there were a lot of things that were exaggerated or even just pure plain fabricated. Even with my own recollection and my own experience, knowledge in the hoodoo tradition, being a leader myself, living by this, breathing by this every single day, I myself came to the conclusion that this story isn't 100% true. However, because of my listeners, I have been challenged to, do an episode where we're going to be Mythbusters today, and we're going to fact check this story. I took a lot of time searching through my archives, going through 4 different compendiums of interviews from practitioners from all over the South. And I was looking specifically for conversations around the 7 sisters. So I would hope that everyone listens to this podcast in its entirety, because imagine going through 4 different volumes and looking for information on the 7 sisters. It took me a while. And then having to compile this information, fact check it, and then find commonalities, which we'll discuss later. So let's just jump right into it. Is this a myth? Did they exist? Did they not exist? Was this story just BS? Was it concocted? What is it, Papa Seer? I do believe that they existed. The variation of their existence, that's very subjective. Do I personally believe that there were 7 practitioners running a business together? I don't. Do I believe they were biological sisters? We'll get into that later. But let's just focus on their existence. And the information, like I said today, comes from a lot of interviews that I have taken information from to put this together. So there is evidence of their existence. I have interviews from people from Memphis, Tennessee, Little Rock, Arkansas, Jacksonville, New Orleans, Waycross, Georgia, Mobile, Alabama, Richmond, Virginia, all over the South. People who wouldn't have had any type of contact with one another, and they all speak of the 7 sisters. Now, they don't all share the same opinion. I do think that it is important to acknowledge that there were a group of women, there was someone in New Orleans who held a gift that was so powerful that people all across the South knew of these women or of this woman. Evidence of this that I have comes from a practitioner from Mobile, Alabama, who says that he was in Algiers where he met Helen, Maud, and Frances. And I quote, the 7 sisters, they call them. Yeah, they're very good girls. They are excellent interpreters. All those girls had a strong mental capacity. And one of them is the best card readers in town. So here we have evidence of someone actually saying that they went to visit them. And not only that, he backs up the claims that they were extremely gifted diviners, fortune tellers, mediums. We then move into Waycross, Georgia, where we have another interview from someone else who speaks of an experience that he had with the 7 sisters. Totally different opinion. However, this is still evidence these women existed. Now, informant from Waycross, Georgia says, and I quote, while I was out there, I went over to the 7 sisters and asked them to diagnose my case. They were known not to miss, but they missed that arm. They really did miss it. I paid them their price. The price they charged me was $50 to straighten that arm so I could use it. Like you see, it's natural. However, they failed to do so. I came back to New Orleans, and when I got back, my arm was hurting me so bad that it looked like no one had even touched it. So I think the first myth that we could put to rest is that these women didn't exist, because obviously they did. And these are not the only 2 interviews that I have where people speak of an experience with them, but these were 2 that I found that were very, very important to use in today's show. And I also wanted to, have a compare and contrast, because we have one that says, hey, they were great. I had a great experience. They were amazing diviners and very good at what they do. But then another one says that he had an experience and it wasn't the best, that he went to get his arm healed and honestly, he left worse than what he came in before. You can leave that up to your own interpretation. I think there are many factors to consider. Even me working as a practitioner myself, I know sometimes that you can have a client and go all out for them, give them the best services, then you can give them instructions, and then the client doesn't follow the instructions the way that you gave it to them, and then the work doesn't work, or it may backfire on them. Or there could have just been some animosity built up. We don't know what was said in the room. We don't know what his experience was. And then let's just keep it real too. We don't even know how they treated their customers. Just because a person is gifted doesn't mean that they always have the best customer service. So, for any of my up and coming practitioners or those out here who are currently involved in this practice, customer service is a plus. Okay. You have to treat your clients, the people that God sent to you, the way that you want to be treated. So anything could have happened during his experience where he could have just left with a bad taste in his mouth, and maybe he started bad mouthing them, or, and I love to play devil's advocate, He truly could just be telling the truth that he went there for a service and they were unable to perform the service up to his standard, or just nothing happened at all. The ritual failed. Whatever was given to him, it just simply didn't work. However, that's neither here nor there. Again, I wanted to bring light to the fact that they obviously existed, because there were people speaking to folklorists during the 1930s and 40s about having face-to-face, hand-to-hand experiences with them. Now, this walks me into my next talking point is, were they biological sisters? To be frank with you, my opinion is I don't necessarily think so. And I have a reason why I believe that. Because for one, I don't even think that there were 7 of them at all. I teeter between there was either one person or there was a group of women, but no more than 3. And I have really good reason why I feel that way. Okay. So before we get into were they biological sisters or not, I want you to understand why I say I don't believe it was 7 people. If it was a group, it couldn't have been no more than 3. Reason being, what we know about practitioners, hoodoo practitioners, first and foremost, we are, for the most part, we're loners. Some of us are involved in a spiritual family, and that is for the aspect of fellowship, that is for the aspect of worship, that is for the aspect of initiation, that is for the aspect of having a network, because there are certain things where you just need help. There are certain rituals where you can't do them by yourself. You are going to need to know someone to help you out with whatever it is that you need to do. However, our personalities tend to be very introverted. Even if we are social butterflies, spiritually, we tend to be very introverted when it comes to our work, when it comes to our secrets, when it comes to things of that nature. There are too many people that we allow in, outside of godchildren or people who may apprentice under us or clients. We don't let too many people into what we have going on, and that preserves the purity of your practice, that preserves the sanctity of your secrets. You just have to put this into logical terms. 7 people working amongst each other in that capacity, at some point, there is going to be a conflict of interest. There's going to be a conflict of spirit. Even if they were biological sisters, what do we know about practitioners? Everyone does something differently. Everyone is led to do things differently. There are more than one ways to skin a cat, and I think that is no more evident than in the hoodoo tradition. Let's get into some more logical facts about this that I want you to think about, why I don't believe that there were 7 of them. You have to remember that during this time in the 20s, 30s, 40s in New Orleans, and even before, hoodooism, to be a hoodoo doctor, it was illegal. It was very illegal. You would have gone to jail. There are so many articles, there are so many news clippings of people being jailed for malpractice or for practicing medicine without a license. Okay. Spiritualism at one point did become legal in the city of New Orleans, but to operate under the guise of a hoodoo or voodoo doctor, you would have gone to jail. We know this because practitioners constantly talk about from that time frame of having to do so much protection work, having to do things to ward off the police, having to ritualize themselves from getting out of jail. We have evidence of practitioners being jailed multiple times during this time period in the Americas. I say all of that to say, if you have 7 women of this immense notoriety operating a hoodoo business, 7 of them, okay, in a city where racism, segregation, all of those factors exist, hoodoo is illegal. There would have been major conflict with the law. There wouldn't have been any way that the practice could have remained a secret, because it's 7 of you, 7 different people operating in a legal business, and everyone knows about it. So even just when I think logically about that, I just think that 7 people operating under one business that is illegal, hoodoo at that, I just can't see it. That also brings me into the aspect of money. As we just heard, one man was charged $50, and that was an substantial amount of money during that time. I do believe it might even have been close to almost like a couple thousand, at least over $1,000 is what $50 would have been worth in today's money during that time. That amount of, they weren't working for free. They were not working for free. No hoodoo doctor works for free. You're not supposed to do it for free. There has to be an exchange. So anybody out here that's doing this for free, you're not doing hoodoo, you're doing something, but this is not free. That wouldn't have been enough money to sustain 7 of them. It's 7 women with 7 different lives. I'm pretty sure someone had children. Someone got married. Someone's got married. 7 women, they all have their own separate lives. And I'm pretty sure someone in the comments is going to debate with me about this, and I welcome you to it. Shout out to the comments. But just from my opinion, logically, I don't think there would have been enough money from generating from one business that would have sustained each and every last one of them. Why do I know this? How do I know this? I mean, for one, I work in this business, and getting people to pay you was back then and still is today one of the biggest issues that we have as professional practitioners. You are never, ever, in my opinion, paid the true worth of what you bring to the table. The things that we do for people and what we get back, it's never enough. So we operate as, honestly, spiritual servants to the Lord. We do this because it's our calling, it's our ordainment, but not because, oh my God, the money's so good. And if anyone's seeking to get into this because they're thinking that this is gonna feed you and take care of you in today's economy without having something else going on, show me the way. Because nowadays you're gonna have to have something else going on. Just from what I know, from people saying back in those days that the hardest problem that they had was receiving income, getting people to pay them their worth for their services, and then you tell me that there are 7 women operating under one business, I don't necessarily believe that. I can see one person for sure, no more than maybe 3, even if they were sisters, which brings me back to the original point is, were they biological sisters? Well, the truth is we don't have any evidence of that. I do think they were sisters, but whether they were biological sisters or not, again, that's subjective. I believe that they may have come from the same family spiritually, but do I think that a person gave birth to 7 daughters who all had the gift of hoodoo? I don't believe that. Why is that? Because oftentimes this power is not, when a person has multiple children, the power, the gift is not passed on to every last one of your children. It's just not. My grandmother always told me power skips a generation. You mean to tell me you had 7 children and all 7 of them had this gift? Again, that's something that I do believe is from the myth. It's from the legend. I do believe that there was one, and other people speak of this too, and I'm going to go back to my interviews. I do believe that there was one amongst them who displayed immense power, who was immensely gifted in the ability of divination, fortune telling, as well as being a psychic medium. And I do believe that she probably was the 7th sister, just like we know in this tradition, there is a superstition that involves the 7th son. So I do believe there was a woman who bore 7 daughters, and the 7th sister was immensely gifted. But do I believe that there were 7 children born from the same bloodline who all shared the same gifts? I do not. Another theory that I want to bring up is that they may not have been biological sisters, and that's okay. There is a theory that exists that these women may have been in a spiritual family. They could have been friends. they would have been in something that resembles something that looks like a coven, and they came together to do spiritual work, that for me is more believable. 7 different, 7 women that come from the same bloodline with the same gift, not so much. But 3 different women who may not necessarily share the same blood, but share the same gifts and come together as a spiritual family to work and operate and ritualize together, that I can see. How do I know that? Because I'm in a situation like that. I am the leader of a spiritual family where many of the people in my spiritual family are gifted, and we do not come from the same physical bloodline. We are of the same spiritual bloodline. And then there are many of us within my unit where we do share gifts or have gifts that are similar to one another. So again, this isn't me tearing down the story. I don't want anyone to think that I just don't believe the story full-fledged outright. No, I'm just trying to play Mythbuster today and confront myth with fact as well as logic. Going back to the interviews, there was an informant from Memphis, Tennessee, who speaks about this, and I quote, "Well, I know all about the 7 sisters, but the way I understand it, there's not actually a group called the 7 sisters. There's a sister referred to as the 7th sister, but it's really just one of them. There are people who claim to know them and think there are 7, but it's really just her. The 7th sister, like someone born on the 7th day of the 7th month." This comes from an informant from Memphis, Tennessee, who talks about that. Another informant from Louisiana recounts, this informant was asked, "Have you heard about the 7th sister?" And they responded they have heard that they were really clever. The interviewer then asks, "Well, are they still alive?" And the informant responds, "One of them is." Another theory is that there could have been 7 women or a group of women. Maybe a few of them died out or all of them, and only one remained to continue the work to hold the fort down. That's a possibility. I'm open to all theories today. I'm just, again, for me, I don't have any definitive conclusion right now. I am just throwing out all of the theories as to where this story could potentially take us, and also just fact checking with the voices of our ancestors. Then there's someone from Mobile who names them and says, "I was there in Algiers with Helen, Maud, and Frances." They actually named them. The 7 sisters, they call them. Yes, they're very good girls. They are excellent interpreters and have a strong mental capacity. And one of them is the best card reader in the country. We have another informant from New Orleans who says, "The 7 sisters were located near the bridge in New Orleans, and one of them is known as Mary. The 7 sisters were known for fortune telling and spiritual work. They used cards, red palms, and told fortunes." So in my own personal opinion, I have come to the conclusion that I do believe that there was a group of women. I don't believe there were 7 of them, but I do believe that there was a group of women. Or my other conclusion or my other theory is that there was one woman who was the 7th sister. Now, there is another theory that floats out there, and I did read this in a few of the interviews actually, where there seemed to be one woman who would disguise herself as 7 different women. One informant even talks about how she would take you into different rooms of the house, and every time you came into a different room, she would be dressed up as someone different, and the person would think that they were talking to 7 different people, but really it was just her being 7 different people. I want to throw out another theory too. It possibly could have just been one woman with 7 different gifts. Me and my spiritual mother, we were talking about this earlier today, And we also came up with a theory amongst the two of us that it could have been 1 to 3 women, and the additional bodies that we're talking about were spirits of the dead, because they were, the reason why I say that, because one of the things that makes them the most notorious is their ability to read fortunes and their ability with mediumship. So I do believe that these additional bodies may not have been physical bodies, but could have possibly been spirits of the dead, spirit guides, so on and so forth. Or maybe there were 7 sisters and they were working with the spirits of their deceased sisters. Okay, these are all things that we have to think about. Spirituality has so many layers. There are so many different rabbit holes that you could go down when it comes to the realm of spirituality. I don't think that there are too many definitive answers as it relates to the topic of spirituality. So I think it's important to accept that whether you believe that this is fact, fiction, myth, legend, whatever you want to call it, there has to be an acceptance. There has to be common acceptance that there is some truth in this story. There's a lot of truth in this story. This is not just a story that is based upon something that someone came up with. There is some truth in this story. Now, I took the liberty of pulling out some commonalities that I found with the interviews that I was able to gather where people actually spoke about the 7 sisters. So one of the first commonalities that I came up with was that there was specifically one amongst this group of women who had the greatest power as a fortune teller, card reader, psychic medium, and diviner. There was obviously one with a stick out ability who seemed to have gifts that were more fluid than the rest. Now, if they were biological sisters, then this makes sense, because typically when gifts are passed down, there is one child, and I stand on this, one that just has this stick out ability that you can't deny. I have not experienced anyone who has had multiple children who share the same gifts or even are all spiritually gifted and then on the same level. Let's say, for instance, if you had 3 children and let's say you did pass down gifts to all 3 of these children, there's always one that is just a stick out, one who's just different and set apart from the rest. So one of the common factors of the 7 sisters, that there was one. Okay, now we can believe again that there was a group of women, or I also think that this gives light to the other theory that there was just one woman who was the 7th sister. So the next commonality was that there was a group of women, probably no more than 3, who worked together. One common factor that I found amongst all of the interviews, whether people believed in this or not, some would say there aren't 7 sisters. Some would say they're called the 7 sisters, but it's 3 of them. There was only one person who was able to name them, and he only named 3 of them. Regardless of how many there were, we may never know. What we can, the facts and the evidence that we do have, we do know there was at least 1, possibly 3. If you believe in 7, you believe in 7, but we have factual evidence that there was between 1 and 3 of these women who were working in the hoodoo business. Okay? Even going back to the theory that there are 7 biological sisters, it could have been that maybe only a few of them, 1 to 3 of them, actually worked in the hoodoo business. See, that's something to think about too, that it could have been 7 sisters, but only 3 of them, 1 of them actually was involved in the spiritual work. Another commonality that I was able to come up with was that there was a woman who was the 7th sister who possessed great ability as a diviner. More than one interview spoke of this, that the 7th sister was the strongest. Okay, so even if the theory that there were actually 7 of them, I have found a commonality that the 7th sister was the strongest or had the greatest ability. We can confirm that they lived near the bridge that took you in the neighborhood of Algiers in Louisiana. I bring this up because there were 2 interviews that I did find where people actually spoke of the 7 sisters and they confirmed their existence, but it wasn't in New Orleans. And I found that rather odd because I had never heard of that before. Every time I've heard of this story, it's always derivative of New Orleans. But one person said the 7 sisters in Virginia, and then another one said the 7 sisters in the Carolinas. I don't want to skip over this and just throw it out as if, that they were just talking. Hey, it could have been possible that maybe they weren't from New Orleans. They could have moved there. They could have been from the Carolinas. They could have been from Virginia and moved there. Or my spiritual mother, she gave another theory that these women were travelers, which I believe. And I think that that's something to really think about too, because their stories are all over the South. Believing that these women had the ability to travel, or maybe they did travel, that's something to think about too, because that would make sense as to why the stories were able to spread as far and as wide as they did. However, the most common denominator amongst all of the information that I was able to pull were that these women were from New Orleans, or they lived in New Orleans, they practiced in New Orleans, their notoriety was gained in New Orleans, and it was confirmed that they lived in the Algiers neighborhood close to the bridge that took you across the river. One commonality that I think is important too, which I think helps us walk towards historical evidence or even just physical evidence that they did exist, that there was a woman among them whose name started with an M, okay? It was either Mary or Maud, all right? I lean towards Mary, and the reason why I lean towards Mary because that was a common name in New Orleans. A lot of people name their daughters Mary just based from Mother Mary, the Virgin Mary. We have to remember that New Orleans, Louisiana at this time was extremely Catholic. So we do know that there was one of them who had a name that started with an M. I lean towards the theory that her name probably would have been Mary, just because of where they were from or where they operated in. Mary makes sense coming from New Orleans. Again, this was a very, very Catholic city. This was a very, very Catholic state at that time. So this brings me to my point. Is this fact, legend, myth, or myth based on facts? I believe that is all 3. I believe that with every myth, with every legend, there is some type of fact, some sort of historical evidence that is somewhere. And then the myth of the legend is built upon something that was true. And then the truth gets stretched, exaggerated a little bit, or even some things that are added along that are fabricated. So I do believe that there is factual evidence, which I went over with you all today, of the existence of these women or women. To toss this story, to toss this out and say, oh, that's just something that someone came up with, I think we do these women a great disservice by saying that. I think we do the hoodoo community a great disservice by saying that, because this was something that people really truly did believe in. A lot of people spoke highly of the gifts that these women were able to possess. Do I believe that there is some myth involved with the story or legend? Yes, I do. I believe these women lived and operated at a time, and I believe whatever they were doing was so great, so profound, that the stories were carried around all over the South, or they traveled with their work all over the South. They became figures in the spiritual community that people looked up to. And we know that when you are someone that people looks up to, others try to duplicate your work, your demeanor, your brand, what have you. So I do believe that outside of what we know to be true, there were things that were added onto the story, probably from people who never met them. I even would go as far as to say that because they were so popular, that some of the myth and the legends surrounding them became, campfire stories, bedtime stories, local town gossip, barbershop gossip, hairdresser gossip, what have you. With popularity, people are going to talk about you. And it's like a game of telephone. Everything changes. It starts off one way and then everything changes once it gets to the end. So I do believe that their notoriety was the cause of the fabrications or the added layers to their story, which confirms what I said prior, which is that I do believe that this is basically just myth based upon fact, that these women existed, certain things happened, and then there were certain things that were just added on to the story. To take this story and just, like I said, just toss it around as if it's a myth, is not doing anyone a good service. I think, and what I'm trying to do with this podcast, or what I hope to do with this podcast, is just to kind of open your minds up to the story a little bit more so that you can see through the layers of, and I'm not telling you what to believe, but what actually could have happened. And what are the fabrications and how these women went on to become very, very legendary. And honestly, I do think that that's a compliment to their legacy, is the legend that comes behind it, right? That you are so great that people now turn you into this bedtime story, that people now add on these additional layers about you. And people, and one thing we know about Black people, our folklore is very, very important to us. Our stories are very, very important to us. And, you take the archetype of these strong women who were basically running a business at a time when women didn't have any rights. These women who had a voice in the community, these powerful women who were gifted from God, and they were working together in unison. They weren't fighting. They were actually working together successfully. You take the archetype and you add additional layers on it to inspire hope to other people. You say things like, oh, well, if you're sick, you can go on down to the New Orleans and find the Seven Sisters and they'll get you fixed up, right? Or people, might even have just fabricated their own stories just out of pure plain entertainment. And that's okay too. Some people might look at that a little bit differently. But what I'm trying to get everyone to see is that how popular they were, how impactful they were. It's the impact that matters the most. What is being said, that's neither here nor there, but the impact that these women were able to become legendary in a time when women didn't have a voice. Black women absolutely had no voice and were treated as second-class citizens. These were women who were able to establish a name for themselves that we're still talking about today. Like, we're doing whole podcasts about it. People have written books about them. There's so many theories. There are blues stories that have been written about them. So in whatever capacity they worked in, no matter how great, small, no matter what level it was impactful to someone. It was impactful to so many people that their names were spread all across the American South. And even today, they are still revered in our tradition of Black American spirituality, hoodooisms, and they have ingrained themselves in the folklore and culture of New Orleans, right? There are archetypes of these women on tarot cards. There are books, so many different things that people nowadays, you probably should be leaving out offerings for these women if you have monetized based on their name. I know I'm gonna do something for their spirits later. I don't care if it was 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 of them. The fact that I'm able to sit here and speak to you all for an entire hour about their legacy in 2024, so many years later, so many decades later, it still speaks to their impact. Right. And there are people who are still monetizing to this day off the image of the Seven Sisters, or the legacy, the legend that is the Seven Sisters. I have to admit that I myself was a culprit of kind of writing this story off as just, oh, okay, that's just legend. That's just something that, we talked about. That's not, there's some truth there, but this is a story. They're stretching it, or like as we like to say, it's a reach, right? You're reaching. And I'm going to be honest, I've been a culprit of kind of just writing the story off in my own way, which is why I haven't done any exposés or talked about them up until this point. So I guess what I'm trying to say is shout out to all of my listeners, viewers, supporters, because you all kind of put this battery in my back to say, you know what, Seer, you have so much information. Your archives are full of so much information about hoodooism, and you yourself are a person with such gained experience in this craft, in this culture, in this religion. Why don't you actually put out something about this? Why don't you do your own research and see what you can find? Because honestly, all of the research that I found outside of grabbing so much from so many different places is very, very limited, and it is based upon what people were told. It's not based upon what the ancestors said. And, for me on this podcast, I really love to showcase the voices of what the ancestors' experience was in anything that we do, anything that we talk about. I don't think that there's anything greater than having the information of documented interviews of practitioners, people who lived during that time, whether they were practitioners or not. They were actually living during that time, who can give you information on these women. So I don't want 100 years from now, people who never met me to give, their thoughts about Papa Seer. I would hope that you would talk to people who knew me, or talk to the children of the children who's people who knew me and are able to give you accurate information about the experience, right? So this is why I said, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this from the mouths of the ancestors. I'm not just going to Google the Seven Sisters or even just go pick up a book. I'm going to go find an actual experience that was had with these group of women. And I have to say that this podcast has truly shaped my opinion on this. I no longer plan to just write the story off or not give it as much attention as it is due. I still have my opinions on certain things because, again, I'm a very, very logical person. And if the logic doesn't match up, then I just don't believe it. I've always been that way. I've always been that way. I'm probably going to die that way. Like I'm very logical. Like things have to line up and have to make sense for me to believe it. You can't just put something in my face and say, here, Siri, eat it, believe it. I'm not that person. I want to see the ingredients. I want to know where they came from, where you bought them, how they were grown, the full nine. That's just me. So certain things about this story, I'm still going to have my opinion about, but at the end of the day, it's still a great story. I think that the Seven Sisters are an amazing archetype for women. I think it also showcases the power of the divine feminine in Black American spirituality. I also think that it showcases the ability of leadership associated with the Black feminine in our spiritual practices, because the divine masculine is not spoken of ever. When we talk about the Seven Sisters, no one talks about if they were married. No one talks about who their father was. I mean, it's always information surrounding the divine feminine. So I think that it just really, really just uplifts the spirit of the Black woman. I think it just uplifts the divine spirit of the mothers and of the women who truly do help keep this practice alive. The women who have helped evolve this, and it leaves us with examples of women that a lot of you all are still trying to model yourselves after, even today in 2024. So again, my opinion has shifted immensely after really just being 10 toes down and finding out more information about the Seven Sisters, not just what was told to me. And again, I didn't just write the story off because I just purely didn't care about it. A piece of that too is on this podcast, I really try my best to showcase people that are not as notorious. I think that, that's one of my niches here on the Hoodoo and Chill podcast is I want to talk about somebody that you don't know. I want to give some clout, or I want to put someone on the spotlight that you might have overlooked, or no one's ever talked to you about this person before, right? Let's be honest. We know about the Seven Sisters, right? But I don't think that there is any other resource or any other content available that's going to go as in depth as I went today. If you do have additional information on the stories of the Seven Sisters, and I mean real information, okay, historical, factual information, an address as to where they lived, their names, a picture of them, something like that, an interview where someone spoke on their experience, oh, please send it my way. I'm always open to adding things to my archive, but I really don't want anyone to put anything in front of my face that was based upon someone's opinion, that, you know, this is what my grandmama told me and this is that and the third. No. I want some historical evidence or something that I can use to add more layers to this story, because I truly believe that the more we learn about them, the more this story is truly going to evolve. And if not, hey, it's going to be a beautiful piece of legend, right? These were women who have now transformed themselves into legend, and I think that the story will continue to transform as the generations of hoodoo continue to be birthed, as the power, as the gift is passed down from one person to the next, to the next, to the next. I believe that the legend will continue to transform itself. Who's to say that there will not be a new Seven Sisters that shall emerge in modern day hoodooism? Or maybe I'm giving, you know, you women a hint, you know, stop arguing and start coming together, you know, as spiritual women like these women did. You're able to move mountains. There are certain things that the divine feminine can do that the divine masculine just cannot put their hands on. Okay, women are extremely powerful. You all have been gifted to us from God, and we love you. I love you, and we cherish you, right? So I am going to conclude here. I don't think I have anything else left on the Seven Sisters. I would hope and appreciate that everyone, again, likes, shares, and subscribes to this podcast. If you enjoyed my breakdown today, don't be shy. Send me a super thanks. I don't care how much it is. It all goes to the same place. It all helps. It all helps keep the podcast alive. It all helps me, you know, put out much better content for you. And I also will be dropping the informational video with the artwork and the stories, because I get a lot of good reviews on those. So again, this is going to be a 2-part project where I give my commentary, and then again I am going to put out an informational video, and I would hope that you all would give me a like and a share on both of those videos. As always, family, I thank you for spending this time with me. I have spoken for like an hour today, so I know there are so many other things that you could be doing other than listening to me, but thank you for being here with me. I send you out in love, light, peace, prosperity, most importantly, protection. I bless your hands, you're coming and you're going. May the things you touch materialize as if it were gold. I ask for Spirit to open up the door of experience for you in your life. More experiences with your ancestors, more experiences with your personal spirit guides, most importantly, more experiences with our gracious Lord. And with that, my people, I release you into the atmosphere. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, then give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends in respective communities. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so let's get the conversation started in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe to Papa Seer for more intriguing stories from Hoodoo history, and I'll see you in the next video.